Okay, so this is really an intro to what Node Noggin is as a platform, and how you might use it as a tool to basically work with groups of people in a multiplayer, multi-thinking situation, in particular within an art school environment or in a design school environment, and how it works and how it might be useful to you. I'm going to show you the demo through Adobe XD, but all the things I'm talking about are in the online version that you can try and play with now at nodenog.in. Just might not look quite as clean and as nice as the images I'm showing you, but all the features will be the same. I'm just going to talk through them and try and explain why it might be a really interesting tool for you to use, and talk about some of the features that we've developed and some that are really new and how they're working as well. So I'm just going to switch to that screen, my screen. Okay, yeah, so Node Noggin is a practice-led research project that's developing new tools, design practices, and in particular has developed a set of principles for designing future education technology, which I'll talk about as well a little bit. The practice in particular explores a new relationship between established art school practices and art school education in particular, and the application of web science, so thinking about a networked, multiplayer, multi-researcher, multi-practitioner space. One of the really important things to understand with Node Noggin is that it is designed as a co-located physical and digital social learning space. So what does that mean? That means that Node Noggin isn't a remote tool. It's a tool for you to work in a group together with a shared networked space. So we're extending the physical space of the studio here into a shared network space. So to take advantage of that network technology to help with multiplayer and also multiplayer thinking. So it's a tool for thought in an education setting, but a tool for thought in any area where you're trying to think through ideas, problems, information. So one of the other key things of Node Noggin is it has what it calls views that allow you to, again, use the space to have students working on small devices, inputting ideas, a big projection showing a spatial view that allows everyone in the room to see the ideas generating together in real time and being collected, and they can respond to those together as a team. It allows you to talk, so you're talking about an idea and one of you is capturing your thoughts on that. And so here, we've got a small team of students that are working on an idea for a project, and they're capturing their thinking in different ways, be that on the small screens, the laptops, or even just responding to the thing on the projected screen. I'll talk a little bit about that as we kind of go through. Here we've got another person presenting their work, and the rest of the group here are using Node Noggin to basically capture ideas, respond to the presentation, to give thought and feedback, to give ideas of new travel and directions of research that they might want to undertake. So at the end of this kind of presentation session, the individual or the team that's been presenting is able to then review the material in one space of the ideas and the thoughts and the kind of directions that the rest of the group were thinking might be useful. So it might be, go and read this book, go and look at this game, go to this exhibition, have you watched this film? Or it might be things along the lines of, I really like the idea that you had in slide 5, those kind of things. And so the last one here, as another example, here the group are discussing a particular theme or topic, and the tutor at the front here is actually then responding to the topics live through the shared spatial interface. They've actually got the big projectors projecting the spatial interface, and the students are inputting through phones, laptops and whatever as one group. The other thing that's really, really important is that when you're adding your thoughts and things into what we call nodes, you're not identifiable. So it's not clear in this scenario which student is contributing what to the screen, and so it allows you to put across ideas, thoughts and things that maybe you think are maybe silly, or you're a bit nervous to put across that idea. But here what we've seen is that more ideas come and more people felt comfortable and more confident to throw in ideas they would have felt less willing to had it been identifiable to them. So they were able to think, wow, it might be a good idea, but I don't want to look like I'm silly or I'm stupid, and so they can put it in there. The other thing obviously is, a lot of the time in these environments we might do these kind of exercises where people are writing things on post-it notes, and then of course, again, you are identifiable, maybe by your handwriting, those kind of things. But also, if we've got individuals who are shy, they can contribute because they're not identifiable. But also, in this shared environment, we can actually work with students who maybe are unable to, write on post-it notes, those kind of things. So it kind of unlocks the room in lots of different ways. If you work in a group where there's obviously, an organisation where people are paid, it also doesn't elevate instantly the highest paid person's opinion, because everyone's opinion has the same standing. So it allows, for a number of things to happen by that nature. What we've also done is, in making this platform, is developed a series of principles for designing any education technology. And so Node Noggin is free software. You can easily export the data, so you can export it out of the system completely anonymized. You can export the whole thing. You can just export your data. It could be run completely independently, so it doesn't need any servers. It's local first, so all the data is stored locally first and then synchronized, but the data is always yours first and you own it. The system is modular, obviously, so you can add features, which I will talk about at the end, and it's private and it's also anonymized. So again, your data is your data, it's private to you. You can decide how you want to share it, and you can also decide to take it away in lots of different options. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of how Node Noggin generally works and some of the kind of settings that it can be in, and I'll just talk through how it works in one example, and how we've kind of utilized it with this new feature. So when you visit Node Noggin, what makes it really quick to get up and running in the scenario that I've talked about, that shared digital and physical co-located space, is that you just visit the URL that Node Noggin is running on, if that's nodenog.in, or it could be your local instance. Put in your name, that connects you to your data, so that you can edit your data, but it is not seen by anyone else, and that's anonymized. And then you choose the name of the microcosm that you want to join. So within the scenario we've seen above, in the art studio, we basically can say, okay, everyone join Art Studio 5, and that's a shared microcosm. Everyone get in, and everyone is in instantly. You can, of course, if you've got your own setup. Here I've got it so that you could run Node Noggin on the server that I'm running it on, but you could then connect it to your own data source. Of course, you could run the whole thing yourself as well and do both of those pieces. So what's then presented to you is the first view that you get to see when you join the microcosm is a single column, your nodes view. And so this works really well on mobile phones, and again in the scenarios in the studio, a lot of students will come with a mobile phone to a session. They don't all have laptops, some maybe have a phone that they kind of bring to take notes on, and then at home they've got a more powerful desktop PC. And so this view allows you to kind of contribute with a very low barrier to entry. You can use Markdown, you can colour your nodes, you can obviously kind of type in as much as you want, you can add in images, etc. So here you've got a view that's just your nodes. What we've also found is when we're investigating an idea, for example, I'm going to talk through a bit where we were doing a anti-capitalism game jam, and we were thinking about what is anti-capitalism, what might be an interesting game, how might that work. We were doing another project where we were looking at toys and what they are and how they function. And so you can type into here just some ideas of what you think that is really, really quickly, without being distracted by the ideas of everyone else. But if you want to see everyone else's ideas, then of course you can, because another view that you can have is the all nodes view. So this shows you what other people are typing. In real time, you can see what they're thinking, and so you can respond to that with your nodes. So you can add an extra node, say, oh, I hadn't thought about Pokemon, but if they're thinking about Pokemon, what about thinking about this? What about thinking about that? So you can add, nodes. So we did a thing where it's like, let's do some keywords. What's your favourite toys? So in your team, boom, 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 boom. Oh, here's my toy. Ah, I've forgotten about that, Transformers, and I want to, do this. So there you can also see them, and also you can emoji vote other people's nodes. So often we say, okay, there's something that chimes with you, an idea, let's all give it like, the thumbs up, or if there's something you're not so sure about, let's give it the sad face. And so you can kind of agree as a team, or a group of students. If you're working on an idea on a slightly larger scale, you can kind of vote those things up. Again, node noggin is small technology. You'd be working with maybe 30 people maximum in one of these microcosms. You can decide as a group what the colours represent, what the emojis represent. So you could have someone presenting a series of ideas, and then you can say, okay, let's bucket things in red that we think are not so interesting, and then let's vote on the ones that are in green and see which one gets the most emojis in terms of resonates with the group. Then the other view that you can have is you can have the spatial view. So this spatial view is often just presented on a projector or a big screen that is live in real time and that everyone can see. And so you might be on your phone tapping away on your thoughts, and then you kind of glance up at the big screen and you kind of have a pause and you go, okay, I see a load of people are talking about this particular thing. I've got an idea. Oh, here's a film that might be useful. Here's a game that might be interesting. And so you can kind of respond to that without being distracted too much if you don't want to be. Also, what we found is that you might have one person who does have a laptop and they really want to start organising these thoughts from the team that are kind of talking and they're tapping away, and they say, well, I know, I'm not going to add ideas. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to start to cluster and move these things around and start to make some connections by drawing lines, and if multiple people make the same connection, it gives an indication to that. You can also collapse the nodes, so you might say, well, okay, these things are less interesting, so let's collapse them, or you might collapse them into different shapes and say, well, shapes mean a certain thing, so maybe triangles we come back to, those kind of things. And so this view can get really busy, but again, if you've got a really big screen, you can see a lot of this moving around and allows you to start to make some ideas, do some emojis, and of course this is the instance where you can have a group of people coming up with one thing, and maybe someone who's leading the project can be responding to the kind of group thoughts around that idea. So it's really, really useful for kind of that unlocking the thinking that's happening in the room. So rather than this being contained within siloed environments or individuals making their own notes and thoughts, they're gathered together into one space. And so of course you can discard if you don't want to put it on there, you can hide it, those kind of things. So it's like you can then sort of contribute as much or as little as you want. And once you get into that kind of the idea of it, what we found is that it really unlocks the potential for new directions, new thoughts, new ideas really quickly, and gets a real group of students thinking about a project together and pushing ideas on. When we did the anti-capitalism one, we obviously asked students to go away, to do some research around anti-capitalism, to come back, and then we presented, a series of workshop scenarios where we used node noggin and said, okay, from what you've done, let's think about anti-capitalism. What does it mean? And then, what doesn't it mean? What do you think it means? And for the toy project, it was the same thing. Go away, do some research on some toys. And we also, in all of these projects, and with most things, you've got like a set of data which is often a reading list, particularly within the education space. So we had a reading list for toy, and we had a reading list for the anti-capitalism thing. And what we did first was we said, okay, who read the reading list? And for toy we had maybe 5 articles, and I think maybe one person read some of it. Most people have freely admitted, we did it anonymously, that they hadn't read any of that material. So what we then said was, okay, let's work on a microcosm and think about what are interesting toys, good toys, engaging toys, And we did a series of workshops where we kind of took some thematic things and said, okay, when you think of a toy that's designed to make you happy, what are the kind of elements you think might be involved with that toy? So they might type, bright, exciting, interesting, whatever they thought that might mean. And so they're all captured into effectively the microcosm of that team thinking about their idea. So maybe that one team was thinking about toys that make you excited, another one was thinking about toys that teach you something. And so it's like, what are those ideas? And so they typed all these things into the microcosm together, and then using the new feature that we've been building, we have ingested into NodeNoggin the reading list. So the text for the toy project or the text for the anti-capitalism project are ingested into NodeNoggin, and there are a specific small set of texts. So for the toy one, it was maybe 5. For the anti-capitalism one, maybe 20 books. And so there are specific small sets of data, the reading list, or we call it the corpus. And then what we did was we took that microcosm of thoughts that the teams had, and then for the toy project we had like 5 or 6 teams, and then we compared it against the reading list. So in this instance, what happens here is you can kind of do all your thinking, you hit sleep, and in this instance we're talking about, leave it for 8 hours. You go away and think about your ideas. When you come back, the tool presents you with a couple of things. So to begin with, what it did was it presented the teams with what it felt from what they'd written would be the most interesting text for them to start reading. So for Team A, it said, okay, read the Guardian article. For Team B, it said, oh, read the academic journal. For Team C, it said, go and look at Seth Gidding's book. And so they were given the kind of, basically, this, based on what you discussed and been captured in NodeNoggin, this might be the best starting place for you to engage with the reading list. And of course, when we asked the students, were you more now likely to read that particular text, the answer was a resounding yes. So they hadn't read any of the texts, but doing this exercise and thinking about the project idea and then comparing those thoughts against the reading list and presenting back the top item, that group, because this is about team thinking, were like, okay, I think I'm going to go and read that now. Now obviously that's still presenting a book, so the next step that we did was we took it and said, okay, let's not only present the top book from the kind of thoughts that have come out of the microcosm, let's present a paragraph of text from those reading lists and see what that prompts. So what that did was, in the anti-capitalism one, for example, in this instance, the team had written a bunch of nodes, and the kind of keywords that have been extracted from that thinking by the sleeping tool, by the sleeper, were like act, self, and creativity. And it said, okay, the top thing you probably want to look at is 33 myths of the system, and also here's some new nodes generated from that reading list, from that text in this instance, that you might be a good way into the material. So it's like, on page 256, the paragraph that starts, the anarchist does not base her view of humanity on how the people around her think and act, but on her own nature. So that's already providing some interesting ideas if you're going to make a game or an approach to think, okay, this text is suggesting there's a particular way that the anarchist behaves. And so that can instantly say, okay, well, what about a game mechanic? What about, a new product? What about a new design system that focuses on that direction of travel? It also allows you to go to the book and start looking at page 256 and see more stuff. And again, when we talk to the teams, when they're thinking about these ideas, were these kind of useful prompts? Were they creative to help them to think about new ways they might engage with the material? And of course, the answer was yes. They maybe wanted to read a bit more. They felt a little bit easier to get into the text because they could start from a particular place. They could just use the text that was here to get them to think about, well, as our team, I'm not sure why it's suggesting these things in terms of our keywords. Oh, it's because all of us thought that being an anarchist was creative, and we'd all written things about creativity. And so it's given us these windows into the text. And on this interface here, the idea would be that you could, then flick to the second book, and it would give you some prompts and insight into these texts. The next thing that we did was we took these texts that have been created and the nodes that have been created by the teams, and we've taken those, and what we've done is put it through a series of different simplified models that will kind of generate new text. So some Markov chains and also some language models. Now those texts are coming from open source trained models in some degree. They slowly sort of build up, and of course that does mean that they can generate some really problematic new texts from the material that they've got, and of course that could be racist, all kinds of things, horrible, rude, etc., because of the biases that are in the training that's happened. And so that allows, in this instance, for us to talk about the fact that, okay, it seems to be that this model is bringing things to the front that are biased, and why is it doing that, and how is that kind of language model working? So again, you can have a conversation about how the machine is kind of thinking about these things. And then the other tool that we've built, which is you can collaborate with these models to create little poems. So it takes you to the groups thinking, groups notes, nodes and ideas, compares them to the text, the number one text, brings out some paragraphs, and then you can then suggest how many kind of syllables you want to take, and it will then allow you to collaboratively create a poem out of that kind of mode of thinking. And again, this idea of kind of this tool for thought, but in particular this tool that allows a group of people to think together, and then maybe to go away and make different things, to come up with different ideas, to use that as an inspiration to just think creatively about a problem they're trying to solve. Now I'm going to do some other videos that show off those the sleeper tools, because they're very specific, but I hope that gives you a bit of an insight into how you can use Node Noggin. The sleeper tools are in the system, but they're not as advanced as this, and so there is still a little bit of manual work to do. So when I was running it with the teams that are working on the toy project or the anti-capitalism project, I was then manually running the sleeper to pull in, and then would go back to the students the next day and say, okay, team A, you should read this book. Team B, you should read this book. Team C, you should read this book. Are you more likely to read the book? Yes. Okay. Team A, here's some paragraphs from that book that are interesting. What do they now get you to think of? So that you've got stuff here where suddenly we've got the idea that there's something about mysticism that relates to the thinking that team has done. That gives you somewhere to go. Right, I'm going to go to the library. I'm going to look up mysticism, find out what that is. Maybe that would be interesting. You've got systematizing, all kinds of stuff that might elicit new ideas. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight and a bit of a way of how the tool functions in a really simple, albeit slightly longer video, but I think it's worth the time to try and talk through it.